Before we begin, please imagine the bell notification is on and you're subscribed to Huna Stories. The elevator ride up to the rooftop felt longer than it should have. Glass walls, chrome trim, the kind of place that smells faintly of citrus and money. My wife had squeezed my hand before the doors opened, a gesture that was half reassurance, half apology. Her father liked to stage things, announcements, promotions, anniversaries. He preferred witnesses. When the doors parted, the skyline spilled out in blue and amber. A long table had been arranged along the railing. Linen, stemware, candles that tried not to look expensive. There were name cards. I scanned them once, twice. My wife's name, her sister's, her brother-in-law's, a few business associates, even a college friend he barely tolerated. Not mine. I waited, thinking perhaps it was misplaced. He noticed the pause. Of course he did. He raised his glass slightly and smiled, with the kind of warmth that never reaches the eyes. Maybe a cheap bar fits you better. It landed softly. That was the craft of it. No shouting, just enough volume for the table to hear. A ripple of restrained laughter, the sort that asks permission before existing. For a moment, something primitive stirred in me. The urge to explain my work, to list clients, to defend the years it took to build something that didn't require his approval. I could have reminded him that my income didn't fluctuate with his opinions, but that would have made the scene about ego. Instead, I looked at the empty space at the table and felt a surprising stillness settle in my chest. "I think there's been a mistake," I said evenly. "Could I speak with the owner?" That earned a sharper smile. He leaned back in his chair. "By all means, maybe he'll comp you a stool." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My wife inhaled, barely perceptible. I didn't hurry. I walked toward the host's stand and asked quietly for him by name. He arrived within minutes. There is a specific kind of authority that doesn't announce itself. It's in posture, in the way staff adjust when someone enters. He approached me directly, hand extended. "Good to see you," he said. "I didn't realize you'd be joining tonight." The table grew quiet in the way people do when something subtle begins to rearrange itself. "We had a reservation under my father-in-law's name," I replied. "It seems my seat wasn't included." The owner glanced at the table, then back at me, and understanding crossed his face. Not confusion, understanding. "Of course not," he said gently. "We wouldn't have approved the booking without your consent." He turned toward the table, still composed. "There's been a clerical oversight. We'll adjust immediately." It wasn't loud, it wasn't theatrical, but it was unmistakable. Two staff members appeared. Another chair was added, not squeezed in awkwardly, but placed deliberately at the head opposite my father-in-law. My name card was handwritten on heavy stock within minutes. The owner remained a moment longer. "We appreciate your continued partnership," he said, "especially with the redevelopment project." There it was. Not a boast, not a reveal. Just context. This rooftop existed in part because of my firm's financing structure, something negotiated quietly over months. I had never mentioned it at family dinners. It hadn't seemed relevant to birthdays or holidays. Until now. My father-in-law's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Not shock, not apology, calculation. He hadn't expected the ground to hold beneath me. The owner excused himself. The staff resumed their choreography. Glasses were refilled. Conversation tried to restart, but stumbled. It's difficult to maintain superiority when the architecture disagrees with you. I sat. No speech, no pointed look. My wife met my eyes across the candlelight. There was relief there and something else. Recognition, perhaps, that silence can carry weight when it's chosen. Her father cleared his throat. "Well," he said, forcing lightness, "glad that's sorted." It wasn't an apology, but it was smaller than the sneer had been. Dinner continued. The skyline remained indifferent. At one point, he asked about the redevelopment project. Casual tone, curious. I answered plainly. Scope, timelines, expected returns, nothing embellished, nothing defensive. Power doesn't always reverse with drama. Sometimes it simply stops leaning in one direction. I didn't feel triumphant. If anything, I felt tired because the humiliation hadn't surprised me. It had been predictable. And that realization carried its own quiet grief. After dessert, people began to leave. Handshakes, air kisses, performative gratitude for the evening. As we waited for the elevator, he approached me privately. "You could have mentioned," he said, low enough that only I could hear. "I wasn't aware it was relevant," I replied. A pause. He studied me, not as a son-in-law to evaluate, but as a variable he had miscalculated. The elevator arrived. Inside, my wife slipped her arm through mine. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I didn't," I answered. "I just didn't have to leave either." That was the difference. Humiliation invites reaction. Composure invites correction. When we stepped back onto the street, the city felt ordinary again. No rooftop, no witnesses. I realized something then. Not about him, but about myself. I had spent years hoping he would eventually see my worth. Tonight made it clear that worth isn't something granted across a dinner table. It's something you carry in with you. The next family gathering may still hold its subtle tests. He may not change. Power in families rarely evaporates. It reshapes itself. But there will always be a seat for me where I choose to stand, and I no longer need him to set it.